Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to unpack the life cycle of self-managed community associations, and we'll explore the hidden warning signs of board burnout. Let's jump right in.
So, let's start with the most absolutely crucial question for any growing community. When exactly does an association outgrow its do-it-yourself approach? Because, look, self-management isn't inherently a bad thing. Plenty of communities start off this way and do perfectly fine for years. But there comes a distinct tipping point where what used to work flawlessly starts creating way more problems than it actually solves.
Now, it's really easy to see the initial appeal here. Things like cost savings, a desire for total control, simplicity, and maybe even a limited trust in outside management. These actually work great when a community is brand new. Think about it. When the buildings are fresh and maintenance is basically zero, keeping operations in-house is a total no-brainer. Keeping things tightly controlled by neighbors makes total sense right at the beginning.
But over time, immense tension builds. Because as properties naturally age, responsibilities pile up, and resident expectations inevitably rise, what was once easily manageable becomes overwhelmingly complex. Suddenly, you've got a small group of volunteers trying to navigate tricky contractor negotiations and massive long-term financial plans. It's a perfect storm.
And that storm leads us straight to our first of 6 distinct warning signs. Everything starts to feel reactive. This is a huge shift. Instead of planning a project, maintenance only happens when it's an absolute emergency. The frantic 2 a.m. leaking pipe situation. If your board is just constantly putting out literal and metaphorical fires instead of preventing them, well, you're firmly in reactive territory.
Warning sign number 2, limited financial clarity. Financial oversight is the lifeblood of any association. But when a self-managed board is stretched too thin, budgets get fuzzy, reserves aren't planned out, decisions are made in the dark, and suddenly you're hit with surprise special assessments just to keep the lights on.
That brings us to the third sign, and it's a painful one: board burnout. This is a very real threat, where an absolute avalanche of tasks piles up and a tiny handful of volunteers are left carrying the weight of the entire community. Nobody signs up for their HOA wanting a second, unpaid full-time job, right? But when the system breaks down, the joy vanishes, and those few hours a month turn into total exhaustion.
Moving on to number 4, inconsistent decision-making. When a board is just trying to survive without clear systems, rules inevitably start being applied unevenly. Maybe one neighbor gets a pass on a violation, but another gets heavily fined. It's completely inconsistent. And you know what that does? It sparks massive frustration and a real sense of unfairness among the residents. 5th, you'll start noticing vendor issues. When projects aren't being consistently evaluated or properly managed, things go off the rails. Rushed volunteers might just grab the cheapest vendor without checking references, and we all know how that story ends. The cheap fix ends up causing unpredictable costs, major delays, and usually costs the community double in the long run. And our final warning sign, number 6, communication breakdowns. Residents start feeling ignored and totally out of the loop. And honestly, it's not because the board members don't care. It happens simply because expectations aren't clear, and that volunteer board is stretched way too thin to physically keep up with all the emails and questions. Now, this brilliantly illustrates the iceberg effect. Up top, you might celebrate those perceived surface-level savings. Hey, no management fee. But look what's lurking beneath the water. Deferred maintenance, inefficient vendors, the massive time costs placed on volunteers, and increased compliance risks. Those hidden costs are silently but surely sinking the budget.
Which brings us to this incredibly insightful quote from the source material. Holding back on outside support often costs the community far more in both operational headaches and actual dollars over the long haul. That really hits the nail on the head. It's the ultimate irony of self-management. The very thing you're doing to save money is usually the exact thing bleeding resources dry.
So we really need to redefine what hitting this transition point actually means. It's a signal that the community has outgrown its current system. Hitting this point is not a failure of the volunteer board at all. It's just a healthy, natural sign of growth. Just like a growing startup eventually needs an HR department, a growing community eventually needs professional structural support.
By bringing in structured support, like the specific systems offered by Principled Community Association Management LLC, your board absolutely does not lose control. Instead, you gain things back. You get clear systems, improved communication, the ability to make confident decisions, and the power to operate proactively. You gain back your clarity and your time.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to spark your next board discussion. Think about those 6 warning signs we just covered. Strong communities don't just stay stuck getting by. They evolve to operate with genuine structure and confidence. So ask yourself and your neighbors, is it time for your community to evolve?